Hey, Steady on here, and this is the third episode of the Lifting Simulator game tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to be making, we're going to make it so that players can earn a statistic, which we've called lifts in the previous tutorials, by lifting the object they have. And if you haven't watched the previous tutorials, you should go back and watch them. But what we've done in those is we've created a tool, which when you click, it will show the player lifting. And we've also created a statistic, you can see up here, it's called lifts, and this statistic saves. So it's given to the player when they join the game, and then it saves to data stores when they leave, and it's retrieved when they come back, and they have the same number of lifts. What we haven't done yet is that when the player clicks lift, I know it's a bit of a bad lifting animation here, but what we haven't done yet is that when the player clicks lift, it gives them a lift up here. So that's what we're going to be doing this episode. We're also going to be adding a bit of very small amount of security in there, basically just to mean that the player can't use an auto-clicking program to do it for them. So what we've got so far is that the player's lifting their tool client side, but the server, which is going to be managing everything important really, does not know that the player is lifting something. So to do that, we're going to create a new script. We could technically put it in this script. We're going to create a new script though for the so it can be organized. So we'll call it core lifting. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a remote event. We could create it in replicated storage, but I like to create things in runtime. It's called, where you create the event while the game's running. And what that means is basically it's just created when the game initializes, the event is created. So we'll say local lifting event equals instance new remote event, and then we can put comma game replicated storage. And what that does is it creates a new remote event and it puts it in this here, replicated storage. But right now it doesn't have a name, so let's call it lifting event name. It's going to be called lift, because that's what it does. It makes the player lift their object really. Well, at least it tells the server that the player is lifting. So you can fire it as lift to say the player is lifting. So now we're going to go back to the client script in the tool, and we're going to find that event. We have to use wait for child because the object's created on the server, it means that the client has to wait for it to be sent to it. So to do that, we're just going to say lifting event, that's what we're going to call it, is equal to game replicated storage wait for child, and we called it lift, if you remember. Yeah, lift. Okay, so this is a local script just in case you didn't realize. So now let's take this, and what we're actually going to do is we created this block of code earlier, where when you click the button, your mouse button, it runs the lifting animation, but it doesn't actually do anything else. So what we're going to do is we're just going to paste this in, the name of it, and we're going to click fire server. And what this will do is it will tell the server every single time that player is lifting that they are lifting this object. Now we're going to match this is the server script here, and what we're going to do here is we're going to detect when the player tells the server, hey, I just lifted the object up. So to do that, we're just going to say, let's first create a function which is going to run when the player lifts it, and we'll just call it player lifted. And between these brackets, the only argument that's going to be passed is the player. So we'll just say PLR. Actually, let's call it player just so it's a bit more simple there. We'll press enter, and then we're going to have to record when the event is fired. So to do that, we're going to say lifting event on server event, which is basically when this is fired, that says fire server, this fires, so on server event, connect, and between these brackets we'll put player lifted, which is, and we'll remove these brackets, which is this function. If we wanted to, we could create a sort of anonymous function between these brackets, but for the simplicity of this tutorial, to make it a lot easier to understand and everything, keeping it simple, we're going to create our own named function here. So what do we have? We have the player, but that's all we have. And that's a good thing really, because what it means is that we're sending very little data over the network, and the only thing we're doing on the client is firing the server, which means that the client's managing very little of this basically core game mechanic. We don't want the client to have much control over how many points they get. So let's just put a note here, and we say we only want the player to lift once every second at maximum. Yeah? So we only want the player to be able to lift their object up once a second, because the reason we want them to do that is because, say they had an auto clicker, an automatic clicking program on their computer, it's like an exploit really, they could spam the event and basically just earn as many points as they want to. the reason I'm setting it to a second is because the animation we created was a second long, so they shouldn't be able to lift more than once every second, really. Okay, so now you might be asking, we've only passed player here. We just got a player object. How are we going to know how long it's been since they last lifted? Well, that's a great question. What we're going to do is we're going to create a table, and this table we'll call it last lifted, and it's going to be a dictionary. But this just creates a table. Yeah. So we copy this. And then when this function fires, we're just going to say if last lifted player dot user ID, which is their ID, their user ID obviously, equals nil. Then we're going to create a new entry for them. So we'll say last lifted player user ID equals, and what we're actually just going to do is os.time, which gets the current number of seconds since a date in 1970 called epoch, which is, well, that's really not really that relevant, but all it means is that if we record the time now and we record the time the next time the player lifts something up, we can compare them and we can tell how many seconds have passed since in between. There is a lot shorter and simpler way of doing this, but I'm keeping it simple so that it's easy to understand. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say if last lifted player dot user ID. Actually, we're actually going to say if os.time take away this is more than 1, then more than, really we should say more than or equal to 1, then we're going to do give player stat. Okay, what we're actually doing here is we're saying get the current time and compare it to the last time we recorded for this player, and if that time is more than 1 second, more than or equal to 1 second, then we're going to give the player the statistic. So we know that the player's stat is literally just called player.leaderstats.lifts, and then it's a value, it's an int value, so we'll say dot value equals, and then we're just going to copy this again. We're going to get the value and we're going to add 1 to it. So let me just make sure actually that is what we called it. I'm pretty sure we called it lifts. Let's have a look. So if we go to the core stats script here, we can see we created a value, an int value, in folder called leader stats, which is in player, called lifts. So then we go back to here, we can see player, folder called leader stats, value called lifts. We're getting the value of it. Then we're getting the value of it again. We're adding 1 to it, and we're assigning it back to the value. So let's go and give it a test. Okay. Select the tool. You can see I have 999 lifts. Let's click. See, I have 1,000 lifts now. Every time I click, I get a few more lifts. But if I spam it, that's interesting. So we've done something wrong here. Let's have a quick look. I have a feeling it's the more than or equal to. Let's have a look. So we're getting the time. This all looks good. So let's say it needs to be more than 1. Yeah, okay, let's try again. So we're not going to allow 1 second, we're going to allow 2 seconds. It's going to be 2 seconds because it has to be more than 1. So if we spam now, you can see it only lets me do it. Okay. I was not expecting that. What have I done wrong here? Let's have a look. So we said when the player lifts it, we get the player argument. We check if last lifted has a record under their user ID, and if it doesn't exist, then we create one under their user ID. Yep. And then we say if os time take away this value, really. Sorry. Yeah, this is my bad. So we need to reassign this value. Every time the player lifts, we can put this equals back actually. Every time the player lifts it, we need to say this is the last time they lifted it. So we're saying here, last set value to last time lifted. Because what this value should be showing is the last time the player lifted it up, and we're comparing the new value to the old value. So let's redo that. My bad. And we can see now that if I spam it, it's only doing it once a second. And what this means is that even if a player has an auto clicker in your game, they can still only lift once every second. Okay, so I think that looks good. That should be the end of this tutorial. I think this is the end of the tutorial series. Obviously, in your lifting game, you'll have a nice map and everything, and it all saves. Let me know if there's anything else you want to know about how to create a lifting simulator, maybe some other components like currency purchasing or anything you want, really. Just let me know, and I will try and make a video on it. So hopefully this was useful. Let me know what else you want to know about in the comments. Subscribe, like the video, and thank you for watching. Bye.